My son spent 11 days building a memory box for 30 people, and my in-laws texted me 40 minutes before the party to say, children weren't welcome at the table. Not a phone call. Not even the decency of a voice note. A text. 9 words. We're keeping tonight intimate. Adults only. Hope you understand. He was 12 years old. He had stayed up past midnight, 3 nights in a row, cutting photos, painting small wooden panels, writing each family member's name in careful block letters. Because his handwriting wasn't cursive yet, and he wanted it to look right. He had used his own birthday money, $43, to buy the craft supplies. He had asked me twice that week if I thought they would like it. I told him yes both times, and I meant it. Have you ever had to look at your child's face right after they read something that was never meant for them to see, and felt the floor shift under you? Because he was standing right behind me when my phone buzzed. He read it before I could turn the screen away. He didn't cry. That was somehow worse. He just said quietly, "Did I do something wrong?" I turned around slowly. I looked at him for a long moment. I said, "No, baby. They did. I didn't call my mother-in-law. I didn't call my husband's brother who had been CC'd on the thread." I typed back 2 words, Stas. Understood. Thanks. And set the phone face down on the counter. Then I asked my son to go wash his hands because we had a lot of cooking to do. He blinked. For what? For the people who actually want to be here, I said. He was quiet for a second. Then he went and washed his hands. That was a Saturday in October, around 4 in the afternoon. By 10 that night, our living room had 26 people in it. By midnight, someone had dragged an amp in from next door, and there was music coming through the back windows. By the time the sun started coming up on Sunday, my son was asleep on the couch, with his head on my neighbor's dog, and there were still 8 adults sitting in a circle on the floor, eating leftover cornbread and talking about things that mattered. And 16 hours after that first text, there was a knock at our front door. Then louder. Then, the kind of knocking that means the person on the other side has run out of patience and switched to their fist. My mother-in-law. Still in the silk blouse she'd worn to the restaurant. Hair still done. Mascara slightly traveled. Behind her, my husband's brother stood a half step back with his arms crossed, which is how he looks when he knows he's wrong, but hasn't decided to admit it yet. I watched them through the peephole for a full count of 10. Let them stand there. Let them feel the weight. Then I opened the door. "Oh hey," I said, casual, leaning against the frame. "You're just catching the tail end. Cornbread's almost gone." My mother-in-law's eyes moved past me into the house. The lights were still on. There were people still there, still talking, someone laughing in the kitchen. She could hear it. "You had a party," she said. Not a question. More like something she was trying to make sense of. "We did," I said. "We kept it adults only, actually. Except for the one adult who lives here and also happens to be 12. I paused. He made the cornbread. Her expression shifted. Not guilt, not yet. Something more like recalibration. Like she was deciding which version of this conversation to have. My husband's brother cleared his throat. This wasn't meant to be personal. The venue had a policy. I looked at him for a moment. "He spent 11 days on that memory box," I said. "He used his birthday money. He asked me twice if he thought you'd all like it." I let that sit for a second. It was personal to him. My mother-in-law's voice dropped into the soft register she uses when she's losing ground. "You're making this into something it wasn't." "I know what it was," I said. "You made a decision without thinking about a 12-year-old who had planned his entire weekend around showing up for your family. And when I say your family, I mean his family too. His grandparents, his uncle. The people he made gifts for." She inhaled. "We didn't think he'd be so involved." "You told me to have him make the photo display," I said. "You specifically said, let him do something, he's creative." Those were your words. From a phone call 3 weeks ago. So you knew exactly how involved he was. She didn't answer that. I stepped back just enough for them to see behind me. My son, on the couch. Asleep. A half smile on his face. The kind kids have when they've genuinely worn themselves out being happy. Around him, my neighbors, his art teacher, the woman from 2 streets over who had known him since he was 4. People who showed up on 3 hours' notice because someone I trusted had told them a kid needed a party. "He's fine," I said quietly. He's better than fine. But I want you to see what you missed. I closed the door, not in anger, with intention. On the other side, I leaned against it for a second. My hands were steady. I don't know why I expected them not to be. By Monday morning, the calls started. First, my husband's aunt, who had been at the restaurant and felt the need to explain that no one had known about the memory box, which I found hard to believe, given that my mother-in-law had been the one to suggest it. Then my husband's brother, who left a voicemail that started with, "I just want to make sure everyone's okay," and ended with, "Mom's pretty hurt by the photos." The photos. I had posted 4 pictures that night, my son laughing. The memory box, sitting on the coffee table, opened, all 30 panels visible, a shot of the room full of people. And one of the cornbread, because honestly it deserved its own documentation. My husband's brother thought the photos were a provocation. My mother-in-law, I found out later, had cried. Not about my son. About how the pictures made her look. My son came home from school on Monday, holding something tight in his chest that I recognized because I'd held it myself at his age. "Grandma didn't text me," he said. "She texts me every Monday." She didn't. I sat down with him at the kitchen table. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I've learned the hard way that sometimes kids need you to just sit there with them in it. "Does that mean she's mad at me?" he asked. "She's complicated," I said. "That's not the same as being mad at you." "Is it my fault?" "No." "Then why does it feel like it is?" I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. "Because you love her. And when someone you love acts in a way that hurts, the brain tries to find something you did wrong because that would mean you could fix it. But there's nothing to fix here. You didn't do anything wrong." He looked down at the table. "She always says I'm her favorite grandkid." "I know she does, but she didn't want me there." I didn't answer that immediately, because the honest answer was complicated, and he deserved honesty, not comfort that would unravel later. "I think sometimes people say things they mean in some ways, but not all the ways," I said carefully. "And I think sometimes the people who love us the most still make choices that hurt us. And it's not because they don't love us. It's because they have limits they haven't examined yet." He thought about that. "That's sad," he said. "Yeah," I said, "it is." That night I got out the photo albums, not to show him, just to look at them myself. 12 years of Christmases and Easters and summer cookouts and birthday parties, my son in almost every frame. Helping carry dishes, sitting slightly to the side, handing napkins, smiling in the background while the adults talked. I held a picture from his 6th birthday. My mother-in-law was at the center of that frame, laughing, glass raised. My son was in the corner, eating cake alone because everyone had migrated to the living room, and no one had noticed. I'd noticed. I'd taken the picture because I thought someday it would be funny, a little kid eating birthday cake by himself, while the adults forgot it was his parties. Sitting there at midnight, 6 years later, it didn't feel funny. I made a decision. My son was going to have a proper celebration, not because anything had been taken from him, because he deserved one. Not as a response to anyone. Just because he was 12 and brilliant and had spent 11 days making gifts for people with his birthday money, and that deserved to be witnessed. I called the rec center where he takes his woodworking class and asked about the event space. I called his art teacher, who said yes before I'd even finished the sentence. I texted 6 of his friends' parents. I ordered a cake from the bakery on Elm that he had talked about for 3 months, because they did these custom-carved fondant designs, and he'd seen one in a window once and said, "That's the most serious cake I've ever seen." I didn't tell anyone in my husband's family. But I didn't hide it either. I posted the invite the same way I post anything. Just put it out there. Didn't tag anyone. Didn't write any captions about who wasn't invited. I didn't need to. Word travels in the way that it does. The day of the celebration, my son walked into the rec center in a navy button-down. He'd ironed himself, because he wanted to look like he meant it. The room was strung with lights. His woodworking instructor had brought in some of the small pieces my son had made over the past 2 years and arranged them on a side table like a little exhibition. His art teacher had printed and framed 3 of his sketches. His friends were already there, loud and already slightly chaotic, which was exactly right. He stopped in the doorway and looked at the room for a long moment. "This is for me?" he said. "All of it," I said. He walked in slowly, like he was trying to see everything at once. He touched the frame of one of his sketches. He stopped at the woodworking table and ran his hand over a small box he'd made last spring, and his face did something private and complicated that I pretended not to see. Every person who came that afternoon brought something small. Cookies, handwritten notes, a few brought things they'd made themselves. My neighbor brought a jar of honey from her backyard hive, because she said he'd helped her carry boxes last summer and she'd been meaning to thank him. His science teacher came on her day off and stayed 3 hours. In the far corner, there was a small empty table. I'd put it there. I didn't label it or explain it, just an empty table with 2 chairs. Around 3 in the afternoon, I saw a car I recognized moving slowly through the parking lot. It slowed near the entrance, stopped, then kept going. My husband's brother, I think, though I didn't go to the window to confirm. Whoever it was didn't come inside. Inside, my son was mid-speech. He had written something himself on a folded piece of notebook paper, and he stood in the middle of the room and read it in a voice that started small and got steadier as he went. He thanked people by name. He thanked his woodworking instructor for showing him that mistakes in wood can become the most interesting part of a piece. He thanked his art teacher for telling him his work was serious when he didn't know yet if it was, he said. "I used to think I wasn't the kind of person people made a fuss over. I think I was wrong. Thank you for showing me I was wrong." I bit the inside of my cheek. I've never been less prepared for something than I was for that sentence. Then the door opened. Quietly, like someone who wasn't sure of their welcome. My husband's younger cousin, 24, rarely said much at family gatherings, always seemed a little peripheral herself, stepped inside holding a small wrapped package. She looked around the room, found my son's face, and walked toward him. "I'm not here for them," she said, before anyone asked. "I'm here for you." She handed him the package. Inside, a wood-carving tool set, the professional kind, in a worn leather roll. She said, "These were my grandfather's. He would have wanted someone who meant it to have them." The room got quiet the way rooms get when something true has happened in them. My son held the leather roll for a moment. Then he said, "Thank you," and it came out barely above a whisper, and that was somehow exactly enough. Later, she pulled me aside near the refreshment table. "You know my aunt's been telling people you staged the whole thing. The first party, the photos, all of it." I looked at her. "I know. She's also been asking around about, I don't know how to say this nicely, about adjusting who's in her estate planning." "She mentioned your name." I nodded slowly. "I figured something like that was coming." She frowned. "You're not worried?" I thought about it for a moment. Genuinely thought about it, standing there with a plastic cup of sparkling cider while my son showed his friends the wood-carving tools. "No," I said. "Not really." She looked at me like she wasn't sure if I was being brave or reckless. "Maybe both." 2 weeks later, I got a letter. Not an email. An actual letter, on cream paper in an envelope from a law office. I knew what it was before I opened it. My mother-in-law's name was on the return address. I was right, it was thorough. Careful. Every mention of my name in her estate removed. Every anticipated inheritance, redirected. Documented and witnessed and official. My son came downstairs while I was still reading it. He looked at my face. "Mom." I set the letter down. I thought about how to say it. Then I thought about what he'd said in his speech. I used to think I wasn't the kind of person people made a fuss over, and I decided he could handle the truth. "Your grandmother took my name out of her will," I said. He was quiet for a second. "Because of the party? Because of all of it." "The party. The photos. The way I talked to her at the door." He sat down at the kitchen table. He put both hands flat on the surface and looked at them. Then he said, "That's not fair." "No," I said. "It isn't. Are you okay?" "Yeah, baby. I'm okay." He looked up. "I feel like it's my fault." "It isn't." "I know, but I still feel like it is." I sat down across from him. "That feeling means you have a conscience and you love people even when they've hurt you. It's not a bad thing to feel. It just isn't accurate." He thought about that for a while. Then, "She still didn't text me on Monday. I didn't say anything." "Or last Monday," he said. I reached across the table again. Same thing I always do. Just cover his hand with mine and stay there. I spent the days after that letter making calls. Not to lawyers, not yet. To people. The ones who had been there. The ones who kept texting to ask how he was doing. A few of them said things quietly that I stored without responding to. Your mother-in-law has always played favorites. This was a long time coming. You were the only one in that family who ever asked my kid's name at Christmas. Something else happened that I didn't plan for. One of my son's teachers had written a short piece for the school's community newsletter about the celebration. The woodworking display, the speech, the leather tool roll. It was gentle and sweet and not dramatic at all. Someone shared it outside the school community. Then someone else did. Then a parenting account with a significant following reposted it with a caption about what it looks like when a child is truly seen. My phone became briefly unusable. I didn't do interviews. I didn't post anything further. But what arrived in my inbox over the next week was something I wasn't prepared for. Messages from other mothers, dozens of them, saying versions of the same thing. My mother-in-law did this to my daughter. My son was always the one carrying dishes. I took a picture like that once, and I never knew what to do with it. I read all of them. I responded to as many as I could. My husband's cousin called me on a Thursday. She said the family was in damage control mode. That some of the people who knew my mother-in-law professionally had seen the newsletter piece and asked questions. That she herself had told the truth when asked directly. That my mother-in-law was not pleased about that. She said you manipulated the whole thing, my cousin said. I made cornbread, I said, and posted 4 pictures. She laughed, which was maybe the first real laugh I'd heard from anyone in that family in a month. My son, meanwhile, was building something. Not literally, though he was also doing that. He was in the middle of a new woodworking project, a small cabinet with inlaid panels, very serious, very focused. But he was also building something else, more slowly and more carefully. A language for what had happened to him. A way of talking about it that wasn't bitter or performative, just honest. He started doing it in the way kids sometimes do, offhandedly, in the car or at dinner, testing sentences out loud. I think some people treat kids like props, he said one evening, looking out the window. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Say more about that. Like, they're happy you exist when you're doing something that makes them look good. But when you stop being useful, they stop looking at you. I was quiet for a moment. That's a very precise thing, you just said. Is it true? For some people, yes. He nodded, like he was filing it somewhere. I don't want to be like that. I know you don't. I want to be the kind of person who looks at people even when it costs them something. I didn't say anything to that. Some things don't need a response. A month after the celebration, he came to me with an idea. He said he wanted to do something for other kids, who were always the ones carrying dishes. Not a big formal thing. He was 12. He had a limited organizational budget, but something. He said he'd talked to his woodworking instructor about maybe hosting open shop afternoons at the rec center for kids who wanted to learn, but whose families couldn't afford the classes. Free? I said. Yeah, he said. Or like, people bring materials if they have them, but no one gets turned away. I looked at him for a long time. How long have you been thinking about this? He shrugged. Since the party. I kept thinking about that empty table, the one in the corner. He looked at me. Why did you put it there? Because I wanted to leave space for people who might need it, I said, even if they didn't come. He thought about that. I want to do that too, leave space, just in a different way. We talked to the rec center director the following week. She said yes. She said she'd been hoping someone would ask for something like this. The woodworking instructor offered to volunteer 2 Saturday afternoons a month. A local hardware store, when we explained what we were doing, said they'd contribute supplies. The first open shop afternoon, 6 kids showed up. Then 9. By the third one, the waiting list was longer than the room. My mother-in-law called once, in January. She didn't leave a voicemail. I saw the missed call and sat with it for a while, thinking about what I wanted to say, if anything. I decided I didn't have anything to say that would serve either of us right now. I didn't call back. My son, when I told him, said that's okay, then went back to his cabinet. My husband's cousin called that same week and told me the family foundation that my mother-in-law chaired had started fielding questions from one of its donors. Someone who had seen the newsletter piece and wanted to understand the organization's commitment to youth programming. Nothing formal. Just a question, but the kind of question that doesn't go away quietly. I didn't celebrate that. It wasn't mine to celebrate. I just noted it and moved on. What I came back to in the quiet of a February evening while my son was at the rec center and I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea going cold was a single moment from October. Not the party, not the door, not the letter. The moment in the kitchen when he asked if he'd done something wrong. That moment is why I did everything I did. Not the inheritance, not the optics, not even the open shop, though I'm proud of that in a way I can barely articulate. Just that question. And what I knew I had to make sure, every day from that point forward, was that he never had the answer to it be yes. He walked in from the rec center around 7, smelling like sawdust and cold air, jacket half-zipped, carrying something wrapped in a cloth. He set it on the kitchen table and unwrapped it carefully. A small wooden frame, finished, edges smooth. In the center, he'd carved letters into the wood. It took me a second to read them. Space for everyone. For the shop, he said, to hang on the wall. I picked it up, turned it over. He'd done the back too, signed his name in small clean letters and underneath, age 12. You signed it, I said. It felt like something worth signing, he said. I set it down carefully. I looked at him. I thought about the $43 he'd spent on craft supplies, the 11 days. The question in the kitchen. The Monday texts that stopped coming. The letter on cream paper, the empty table, the leather tool roll, the 6 kids, then 9, then a waiting list. Yeah, I said. It does. Because here is what I know now. When someone tries to make a child feel like a footnote in their own story, you don't argue. You don't perform. You don't wait for an apology that might not come in the shape you recognize. You just keep showing up for them, loud and steady, and on purpose, until they remember, deep in the place where it counts, that they were never a footnote. They were always the whole story. And sometimes the people who tried to erase them end up watching from a parking lot, too far away to see anything but the lights inside.